you. All right, so it's time to do the nose. Welcome. And welcome to me, too. I guess I've been off for quite a few days here. So I'm a little out of rhythm. And a lot of people say to me, you're not particularly polished like when you're in your groove. So, what difference does it make if you're out of your rhythm? And I think that's a fair question. Today on the nose, we're going to talk about Catch-22. Not the old movie, not the old book, but the new miniseries of it on, I assume it's only one season, but who knows, on Hulu. Things can just go forever. Anyway, it's on Hulu. We watched it. We're going to tell you about it. We're also going to tell you who we is in just a second. I also have to tell you that we are going to talk about a list of all of the series ever to appear on HBO ranked, and whether we agree with these rankings. And we're also going to be talking about, here in graduation season, apparently pretty much the most popular book gift, maybe the most popular gift that people give at all, is The Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss. And we're going to talk about whether it's in fact a charming, affirming book for a graduate or some kind of Ayn Randian assertion of individual power. Or both. Could be both. Now, I'll tell you who he is. Chris Grosso writes for Revolver magazine. He's the author of 3 books. His most recent is Dead Set on Living, Making the Difficult and Beautiful Journey from Something Up to Waking Up. This is his nose debut, but he's been on the show before, and when he was on the show, I just, at the end of the show, said to Jonathan McPants, he should be on the nose. So here he is. Irene Papoulis, who was on the original first ever episode of The Nose, so that's the other end of the continuum, and continues to delight us after all these years, teaches writing at Trinity College. Bill Usman is a professor of media studies at Sacred Heart University and amateur vampire.
Can I just say something really quick?
What?
You said you were out of your rhythm.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I just had a flash to when you were on your other station a long time ago, and you had this whole riff about how you didn't have your mojo and you wanted your mojo back. And that was before I had met you, and I was listening to it. I was like, oh my God, that was so interesting. It was such good radio. And I was thinking, you make an art out of being out of your rhythm.
I think that's a good thing. I'll have to think about that, but we're certainly going to cut that up as a promo anyway. So we're going to begin where we'll get to Catch-22. That'll be our third and final topic. We are going to begin with the aforementioned Dr. Seuss book, and this is all kind of apropos of a column by a book critic for the Washington Post, Ron Charles, who basically makes the argument, well, let's forget about what argument he makes. I want to hear what argument we make. So Irene Papoulis, I'm going to have you talk again as the person who teaches writing and teaches about books. And first of all, have you ever given or received The Places You'll Go?
I have not. And I would never give it to, it's more like something I would give to a third grade graduation, not a college graduation, And I actually hadn't even read it, even though I love Dr. Seuss. Somehow I hadn't read that one. And so I read it now, and so I'm prepared to talk about it. And I have some differences with the guy, what's his name, Ron Charles.
Ron Charles, yeah.
But I do think it sort of indicates if people are giving it for college, it just kind of breaks my heart that you would give a children's book like that, because there's so many other better books to give a college grad.
Well, one could argue that you could give them a really good children's book, but the question is this that? So, Chris, you write books that teach people how to be spiritually uplifted and how to take the right path. You write books that could conceivably be given to somebody at a graduation. So how does Dr. Seuss and The Places You'll Go land with you?
Well, I have to say, I think I'm the most unqualified, even though I am a writer, to answer this, because I never graduated college. I didn't even get an associate. So I'm coming from a complete high school background, and unfortunately I didn't get it for a high school graduation. I've never given nor received it like Irene. What I appreciated about that article, though, was the fact that at the end, the writer did offer, here are some books that actually the graduate might read and benefit from. So, hey, if you're going to give that book as a gift, okay, but why not also give another book with it? I'm sure it's relatively inexpensive. So that's my 2 cents in a nutshell.
It's never gone out of hardcover, though, so it's not.
Yeah, 800,000.
It's not that inexpensive. And actually, this article by Ron Charles at the end and does a kind of a nice job of putting them in different categories. If you want to give a children's book, here are some better children's books. If you want to give a sort of Chris Grosso type spirituality book, here's a few of those books. Here's some advice books. Anyway, so Bill, I have a lot of questions for you, including, have you ever given or received The Places You'll Go?
No, absolutely not.
This is like, are you now or have you ever been?
No, how dare you, and I will name names. My wife actually reminded me, I had forgotten all about this, that there have been several times when we've been in a bookstore around graduation time where I've made a sneering comment as we walked by that particular book on display, which it always is. I think this is a great column by Ron Charles, and there was so much in it that I just thought really landed very, very well. He calls it the perfect book for an Ayn Rand-themed baby shower, which is such a great line, but I think is absolutely right, because what he goes after is this libertarian fantasy that's embodied in the book of, you can conquer everything and you can do it all by yourself and you don't need to rely on other people. He tells a very poignant story of his own family and how that idea was such a betrayal to them because of the issues that they suffered through with one of their children, and how much it brought home to him that we do have to rely on other people. We can't just do everything all on our own. And it's such a terrible thing to suggest to anyone, I think, but particularly to a college graduate, that, now you are all set to just go out and conquer the world.
Be the top of the tops, right?
Yeah.
There was going to be a whole section about maybe you'll also be able to sublimate your own appetites for the greater good, but it just didn't fit with the rest of the meter. I think Dr. Seuss had to quit that. So that's your real problem with it, right? It's just kind of...
It's a libertarian fantasy. Yeah. And there's kind of this sad image that he alludes to of a college, in today's economic and social political environment, of a college graduate coming home and living in their parents' basement with this book on the shelf, Oh, the Places You'll Go.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't disagree more.
Oh, good.
Oh,
yeah. That's excellent.
I disagree.
Okay,
yeah, because I went to the book. I read the article first, and then I read the book online, which I hope was the actual book online. And I said, "Come on, Ron. It's just he's the idea, because I'm all for criticizing the libertarian fantasy." But I don't think that's what this book does. I think this book does exactly what I try to do as an advisor all the time, which is just kind of encourage people to just like go out into the world as they are, and I don't, at least, it doesn't he say, I'm sorry to say so, but sadly it's true, bang-ups and hang-ups can happen to you. You get all hung up in a prickly perch and your gang will fly on, you'll be left in the lurch. Isn't that true? Your gang, and that's not saying you should be alone and your gang doesn't count. If your gang will fly on and leave you in the lurch, yes, that's what happens. And you can get stuck in a slump forever. And I have done that in my life many times. And so I feel like, no, it's just a beautiful image of getting out of your slump and being, warning people bad things are going to happen. You're going to have these fantasies, but they're not necessarily going to come true.
Well, this is good.
So
this is exciting. We like it when people don't agree. So if everybody was going to crap all over Dr. Seuss, that wasn't going to be good. One thing that I would say about this is that, and I think I reviewed this book when it came out. I was trying to find, unfortunately they didn't digitize, I don't think, all the way back to 1990. And I also was writing on papyrus, I think, at that time. But I don't remember what I said about it. Although I doubt I trashed it. I mean, because I think at first blush it does seem like, sort of taking all of Dr. Seuss's tropes and turning them into a graduation speech. Although as I think about it, I think it's almost the only Dr. Seuss book that doesn't really have a plot, right? Mostly Dr. Seuss books are stories about things that happen. And this is just kind of this speechy thing about what is or isn't going to happen to you. But it still worked for you.
It worked.
Yeah.
And by the way, Crap on Dr. Seuss was supposed to be the follow-up to Hop on Pop,
yeah.
but they censored it.
Crap on Pop, yeah.
I love Hop on Pop. Oh, no, and I love the one, Do You Like My Hat? No, I do not. I forget which one. Go, Dog, Go. Go, Dog, Go. That's my favorite.
As long as we're affirming our Dr. Seuss, I will say that a big favorite of ours was not just One Fish, Two Fish, but the section where you would read to your child, "Look what we found in the dark. We will take him home. We will name him Clark. He will live in our house. He will grow and grow. Will our parents like this? We don't know." That is how you have to read it.
And PETA had a real problem with that because it's a sentient being, Colin.
So Chris, as the resident uplifter of people, I mean, it's an interesting question. It's like, what book would you buy for? First of all, you'd probably, if you were going to buy a book for a graduate and it wasn't going to be one of your books, it would depend a little bit on the person and the message you wanted to send. But I don't know, like you read a lot of very inspiring books.
I do. And quickly, I do want to say, not that I'm trying to play it safe, but I hear what both Bill, yourself, and Irene have said. And before we move on from that, I feel like I kind of am, in a way, a poster boy for that book. As I said, I didn't graduate college, and yet I make my living writing books, traveling, speaking in front of thousands of people. So I really did go, I followed my dreams. And I know that's rare, and I totally hear what Bill was saying about, especially in this day and age with college students and the, just the hardships they face and moving back home. But I think that there is an authenticity to that book. Not that I would give it, again, as a gift. But what book would I recommend? You're right. It would depend on the person. But my first inkling is something probably from Bukowski.
Oh, really? Well, that's
to throw
that's
you for
not
a
where I
loop.
thought you were going to go.
No, I think because I believe in raw and visceral writing, and maybe like one of his, if not his final book, the Last Night of the Earth poems. I think I've read that book several times. I think it's absolutely amazing. So I might give that.
Take that, Ken Wilber.
Yes, which I love, but
I know. I'm just teasing. So, and Bill, I think maybe I can segue in a way that wraps this up because, so maybe I sort of get what you and Ron Charles are saying about the places you'll go. Although, to Chris's point, there's a way in which the earlier Dr. Seuss, he kind of was the Charles Bukowski of children's book writers in the sense that, if you think about what children's literature—
That was a stretch.
Well, it's a stretch. But,
no, but go on.
Well, if you think about what children's literature had been, I mean, it'd been kind of relentlessly sunny, and Irene and I are kind of close to being the age where, we were among the first Dr. Seuss readers. I don't know. I forget when these books came. So when you saw these, and that's a very anarchical book. It's like a book about trashing your parents' house when they're not there. It's sort of risky business, the early years. There is something about Seuss that you have to give him credit for anyway, which is to lead us off, back in those days anyway, into places where we really hadn't gone.
Oh, yeah. And, when my kids were little, we all, them, me, everybody, loved all the Dr. Seuss books except for this one.
Yeah.
And this was the last one to come out before he died. So it is an anomaly in some ways. And, some of the books, like you say, are not sunny at all. The Lorax is a really, really dark story. And so, of course, it's also my favorite of all of his books. He was a complicated guy himself. Theodor Geisel was a complicated guy. We think of him, as kind of this very progressive liberal guy, but he did World War II propaganda cartoons that were incredibly offensive to Japanese people. He supported Japanese internment. So there are some complications with Geisel beneath the surface. And so maybe this book is a little bit of an anomaly if it does represent a more kind of libertarian perspective.
Or maybe, maybe really is an Ayn Rand libertarian.
So I'm being told from the booth that Irene and I were not, unless we were like Captain America, Steve Rogers, frozen in an iceberg right after reading the first few Dr. Seuss books and then revived and brought back to life. We were not among the first generation of Dr. Seuss readers.
But I do remember reading The Cat in the Hat as a child, so we remember that really clearly.
Well, they just Naomi Wolfed you.
The Naomi Wolf. We're not doing the Naomi Wolf.
Google
topic.
it. Google it.
Yeah, Google it. Exactly. We're not doing the Naomi. There's a lot of topics we could have done, ranging from. I mean, we had an embarrassment of riches for topics this week, and the Naomi Wolf being but one of them, and the wonderful finish of the Scripps Howard Spelling Bee with the 8 winners, which we don't have any time to get to, and all this kind of stuff, because we kind of got obsessed. Some of us did anyway, with this list that appeared on the Vulture website. It is a list of all of the series that have ever appeared on HBO and ranked in order of excellence from worst to best. I would hasten to add there are certain things that didn't qualify for some reason. Sharp Objects and My Brilliant Friend, I guess they are not considered series. Maybe they're sort of one-off miniseries, self-contained thing. I don't know why that. Well, anyway, did all the suspense. The Sopranos was number one, and after that, it gets kind of tricky. So where should we start? I'm going to start with Chris. I mean, I'm going to get you just any reaction you want to have to the list.
Yeah, so I mean, it seemed to me rather obvious with, I think Sopranos number one, which I would agree with. Wire, for me, is right up there. A lot of my favorites, like 6 Feet Under, I was happy to see still somewhat higher on the list. The one that I'll be discussing whenever we come to that, John from Cincinnati, I was shocked that it made it as high as 29. I think it was 29. I'm pulling it up right now.
And you like it.
Yes, and I like it, and I'm saying that as someone who's sincerely shocked. But I think the list overall, it's subjective. It's just one person's opinion. We all would make our list, and I'm guessing a lot of us would have similar top shows in the top 10. But overall, I agree with a lot of it.
Let's just pause here about just so we don't forget to do John from Cincinnati, and because I've saddled Chris with the job of making a case. So this is, I think, David Milch right after Deadwood, right after Deadwood, and right after all kinds of other great things that happened on HBO, and people were looking for the next thing to watch, and people were all saying, "John from Cincinnati, here it comes. It's going to be the next big thing." Right. Let's hear a little clip. I don't know exactly that I know how to set this up. This is Peter Jason as a Carl salesman and Austin Nichols as John Monad, and we'll just take it from there.
Also have to know what I mean before I can have a feeling. Do I have to know that you'll understand me? Do you have to know you'll understand before you listen? 25 cars between you? Oh, you should have let me sit down before you told me. I've got that many dealerships in each of that many sectors. Brands on goddamn franchise. I got a boogie. Me!
He feels you're ready for the Camino.
You're offline now, country.
I don't know Butchie instead.
How's he for high performance? And he ain't who's worst underpowered. Intrusions, evanescences. I'm a shepherd without crook or understanding. Fits and stops and starts. Waves and ripples and ramifications. Busted knee, mother-son hand jobs, Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. Crosses and shoulders to bear 'em.
On the one hand, I suspect that Jonathan McNichol picked the most incoherent, raving cut that he could find to put Chris in the most disadvantageous position possible. But I also think that might not be the case, because I did watch that series, and it was extraordinarily hard to figure out what people were talking about.
Right.
Yeah, good luck, Chris.
Yes,
go ahead.
And I will. So, first of all, I was turned on to this series before there's the co-writer, not David Milch, but Ben Nunn, who is an incredible surf noir author. And my friend Eben, who works over at Thrasher Magazine, turned me on to his books. Tapping the Solution came out in '84. I read that. So I really was a fan of that. And, of course, huge fan of Sopranos, watching the finale. Fades to black. I'm maybe one of the 5 people in America that actually cheered, that was absolutely brilliant, while everyone else is breaking their TVs in anger. And then the John from Cincinnati trailer comes on, after the credits finish, and I was super excited about it. And the one thing I'll say is that this is one of the HBO series where I've only seen it once, and I did not feel a need to go back. And that's not because I didn't love it. Yeah. It's just because, Sopranos, I've easily gone through that series 6 times. 6 Feet Under, 5-6 times, just because I still catch new things, and I love it. So my case for John from Cincinnati, as I was watching it, it is a show kind of about itself. It is. I understand why people have a hard time with it. I think one person reviewed it as saying it was the most what the F HBO series of all time. But I think that was, in a way, the point. It was a show that was more of an artistic and aesthetic vision. David Milch in an interview did say that he was only given with Ben 4 months to write it, and he feels that did not give the show justice. But while I watched it, I laid aside, I don't need to be fed the storyline. I just appreciated it for it was, the visuals. There were great storylines in ways, the acting was phenomenal. It was fun to see throwback Luke Perry and Mark Paul Gosselaar, amongst other great actors in it. I don't know what else the actor who played John was in, except I saw him in The Walking Dead a few seasons. But I did want to share because so I'm watching it, and to me it was a very spiritual show. It really was. It was like kind of magical in a way, and I felt good while I watched it. And I know a lot of people still to this day, what the hell is that show about? And to me, while I was watching it, I remember with surfing being the backdrop, the waves. There's this Eastern teaching that the wave is still part of the ocean, and that's a metaphor for us being part of the universe. Take that for whatever it is. But so I looked up the other day trying to find if David Milch ever commented on what his vision, what it meant. And I did find he had done an interview with Tavis Smiley. And in it, he quotes, "The idea behind John from Cincinnati is that the universe is a solid system, but also a series of waves, and that man is not an individual creature, but that his essence is carried from seeming individual to seeming individual and becomes available to surfers if they aren't loaded and selfish or if they don't become addicted to the behavior of surfing itself." And I think that lends itself...
Yeah, you're kind of making me want to go back and watch the series. Or you being something of a newbie to HBO probably don't even know about this whole thing.
I had never heard of John from Cincinnati, but I love the clip. That guy sounded great, and I love your endorsement of it. And also, can I ask, what is surf noir? I never heard of that.
It's kind of just like it sounds, like noir, but it's based on surf culture, California, whether it's Imperial Beach, Long Beach, and it's just
Is it novels?
Yes, novels. Exactly. Yeah,
Wow.
It's fiction. Probably the most well-known writer again is Ben Nunn, Nunn, and his book Tapping the Solution, which again came out in '84, I believe. Just for me, it's a classic. So
thank you. You opened up a whole new.
So
arena.
I want to swing over to Bill Usman. One of the things
I saw what you did there.
Yeah, exactly. So that we also were discussing. First of all, we're going to need to back up at a certain point and just kind of talk about what HBO has become, what it turned into. But since we're already doing this, we did ask whether people had little darlings on the list that didn't do as well as one might have hoped. And so Bale, how am I doing?
Pretty good.
Bale's a big fan of True Blood.
You need that gap between your teeth.
Exactly, yeah.
Because that's what's so charming.
So Bill's a big fan of True Blood. We don't have a good clip of Anna Paquin saying the name Bill. Instead we have the clip of Anna Paquin saying the name of her own character, the way Bale says it.
Sookie.
Every sound I hear, every time the phone rings, every shadow in the corner of my eye, I think it's Bill. I keep expecting him to come through the door and say, "Sookie."
There you go.
Good one.
So you were a fan.
I love it. Yeah. I love Sookie. I love True Blood. I actually love Alan Ball. And, I thought 6 Feet Under coming in at number 14, that's fairly high on the list. I think it should have cracked the top 10, definitely. But True Blood came in at number 55 of 74 shows. And I was outraged. I know it's pulpy. I know it's trashy, but that's really kind of the point of it. And in addition to all of the the gore and the spectacle of people exploding and things of that nature, it also did do an interesting political allegory because it's set in this small Louisiana town where all kinds of supernatural creatures coexist, and vampires can live with humans because of the creation of this synthetic blood that they can drink instead of having to, suck the life out of people. But there's this internal division amongst the vampires about assimilation versus forging their own kind of outsider status, which was, I think, a really great political allegory. You see protesters holding up signs that say God hates fangs. And so Alan Ball is just saying, look at what I'm doing here. But that really impacted for me. I thought it was a fun show. And it also, by the way, it started right after The Sopranos ended, and for years it was the most watched show on HBO.
Right. A couple of things about that. First of all, I think the biggest problem with True Blood is 7 seasons. There's sort of a sweet spot.
Yeah.
And there's a number of shows on this list that never got the exposure they deserved because they didn't go enough seasons. The Ladies Detective Agency being one of them. That just ran for one season. Luck, which was this tremendous horse racing thing with Dustin Hoffman and the wonderful Kevin Dunn, ran for one season, and then the horses started dying on the set, and they had to shut it down. But 7 seasons is a really long time, too.
Yeah, and Alan Ball was not associated with the last 2.
Right.
And that's really where it kind of started to drop off. They probably should have stopped with the 5 that he actually worked on.
So if you bought stock in Game of Thrones a month ago, your stock has fallen. Game of Thrones dropped to number 8 after being the best thing in the world. But so, Irene, we haven't heard from you, and you are, 6 years into a relationship with HBO?
I realized it was only 5. HBO was like the promised land that other people talked about that I never, knew about. Even with I remember The Sopranos, everyone would talk about it, but I couldn't watch it because I didn't have HBO. But then I ended up getting DVDs, and my son would go to when he was in high school, he'd go to his friend's house to watch True Blood once a week. And it would be like, what is some vampire movie? I don't know, and that's all I knew about it. And then I heard that it was much more interesting than I had realized. And one of the ones that I got, and so I got some other ones only on DVDs, and one of them was In Treatment. So can I talk about that?
You can talk about In Treatment, yes.
Yeah. I just loved that show, and it was very different from you loved it too.
Loved it.
Yeah,
Bummed.
Yeah, I'll give a
canceled.
triple endorsement of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember watching that first season, and it's like, how often do you get to participate in a therapy session with somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the whole show is just about. Even though you're going like, wait a minute, it doesn't exactly work like that in real therapy, because it's sort of But the characters were so great, especially the first season. I thought, just Blair Underwood, and it was just so, and it wasn't like a story in the usual sense. It was really each person sitting there with their therapist talking. Just
All right.
wonderful.
We're going to unfortunately have to wrap this up, although I do want to say just very quickly that one reason to do a list like this is AT&T is now kind of taking over HBO. Richard Plepler was one of the people who drove a lot of the very creative decisions. I mean, Alan Ball was interviewed in the New Yorker one time saying that when he went to HBO, I think he went and presented something more kind of commercial, and they said, we don't want to see that. We want to see the thing that you don't think anybody would do. That's that's the thing we want to see. And they kind of specialized in that. And even though the president of AT&T Connecticut got on Twitter today to tell me that they certainly are not going to mess up HBO, I think a lot of people have worries that they're going to sand some of the edges off of what HBO has been so far. So time will tell. We got to take a break, so we'll have time to talk about something that's on Hulu, and that's Catch-22.
I'm just about as solitary as anyone could be. Of course, my life is not so merry, but that's all right with me. No love, no nothing, until my baby comes.
That's Rosemary Clooney singing a song from World War II. Her nephew, George Clooney, has been very heavily involved in and was originally planned as the kind of one of the big lead characters for this revival of Catch-22 on Hulu. Her granddaughter actually plays a fairly sympathetic nurse also. So the Clooneys have been very involved all the way through Catch-22. We all saw this. It's a revival, I don't know, reboot, I don't know what you would call it. It takes the original Joseph Heller novel and the Mike Nichols movie and chops it up into multiple segments with a new cast of young faces. And so we've all seen either all or some of it. I think I'm just going to go around the table and see how people are feeling in general about it. So I'll start with you, Bill Usman. How did this land for you?
It lands.
We should say that you did the big deep dive, right? Yeah.
I did the big deep dive. I went back to the novel. I rewatched the film. So this is, the third iteration of it in a different medium. I think for the most part, it landed pretty well. I do feel really comfortable endorsing it. I do think it's worth watching, with a caveat, which is that, and maybe this is unfair, but for me, the novel, Catch-22, is such a supreme achievement that the film fell short, although I think the film has been underrated. I think the film is better than, for the most part, it was received. And then this, as a show, also falls short. But maybe, I don't know if it's fair to critique it from that perspective, but I'll tell one kind of specific thing about what I think the problem with it is in this iteration as a television series. The book is extremely subversive, and it's written in this postmodern kind of structure, and it, at least the first 2/3, maybe the first 3/4 of the book, are unbelievably funny. Laugh out loud funny. Heller's writing, his sentences, the dark humor that he evokes, I don't think has translated to this newest iteration. I mean, there are some elements of it, of course, because
they try.
Yeah, there's some of the same scenes, but I don't think it comes through. And because of that, I don't think it's as much of a critique of not just war, but of all the structures and systems that bring us to war as the novel was. Again, I don't know if that's a fair comparison, and I do think it's worth watching. But for me, that was always a constant battle as I was watching it in comparison to going back to the book.
Before we go to Chris and Irene, let's hear a little clip from the movie. This is Christopher Abbott, who has supplanted Alan Arkin as the main character, Yossarian. He's talking to the actor Grant Heslov, who plays Doc Danica.
Is Orr crazy?
Oh, he sure is.
Can you ground him?
I sure can, but first he has to ask me to.
Then why doesn't he ask you?
Because he's crazy. He'd have to be crazy to want to keep flying combat missions. Sure, I can ground Orr, but first he has to ask me to.
And that's all he has to do to be grounded?
That's it, just let him ask.
And then you can ground him?
No, then I can't ground him.
Why not?
Catch-22. Anyone who wants to get out of combat duty isn't really crazy. Catch-22 specifies that a concern for one's own safety in the face of danger, real and immediate, is the process of a rational mind.
What?
Orr's crazy, and therefore he can get out of flying combat missions. All he has to do is ask. But as soon as he asks, he's no longer crazy, and so he has to fly more missions.
What?
Orr would be crazy to want to fly more missions and sane if he didn't. But if he's sane, then he has to fly them. If he flies them, then he's crazy, and so he doesn't have to. But if he doesn't want to, then he's sane, and so he has to.
That's some catch, that Catch-22.
It's the best there is.
I should say that Grant Heslov, who plays the doctor in that scene, is, along with George Clooney, one of the two showrunners and directors on this project. So anyway, there's the premise, there's the title. So Chris, tell me about how Catch-22 was for you.
So I'm about to lose any credibility as an author in saying that I never read Catch-22. I will
You're not
say,
alone.
Okay. I will say, after seeing this series, I did not see the movie either. I do intend to go and read it. I've become more of a fiction reader and later on in life. I think like the only old war book I'd read was Johnny Got His Gun, which I loved. That said, I came into this series not knowing its background, not knowing what it was about. I honestly probably would not have watched it had I not known that's what we were discussing today. But so I watched episode 1. There was one scene with Clooney and the stenographer that I laughed out loud at, and that gave me the sense of, okay, like here's the kind of comic part. As the series goes on, no spoilers, but what I found that I enjoyed about it was the dramatic or the gory scenes that happen, even though they're very obvious, that they're coming, I still felt moved by them. Like, again, I won't say any of them and spoil them, but still when something happened and was graphic, I still I was caught aghast from. I was like, whoa, and
You
not
should say that something happened is a different Joseph Heller book, but anyway.
Okay, there you go. So not that any of it was jaw-dropping, but I'm glad that I watched it. I felt as like episode 2, 3, 4, like it for me. It engaged me. It kept me. I finished the series on Wednesday, I believe, and I'm glad that I watched it. I like George Clooney. I like what's his name that took over? Kyle
Kyle
Chandler.
Kyle
Chandler, and then
Coach Taylor.
Coach Taylor, exactly. I was going to say the Friday Night Lights guy.
It's
like
the same
him.
character, just a little rougher around the edges.
Right. Yeah. The whole scene about why didn't we bomb this area, and then the guy, that's the Vatican. Like very funny. And then of course Hugh Laurie, I believe, House. I like him. So. Great cast. I thought the acting was very well done. And overall, I would recommend it. But again, that's based on the fact that I have not read the book or seen the other movie.
All right. Before Irene goes, let's actually play the clip that made Chris laugh. It's George Clooney showing off some of the kind of comic timing that I think he's picked up on the sets of Coen brother movies. But here we go.
Are you mentally retarded, son?
No, sir, I'm just innocent. I'm innocent until proven guilty.
Says who?
Everyone, sir. The Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence.
You believe all that crap?
Yes, sir. I'm a free citizen in a free country. I have certain
You
rights.
are nothing of the kind. You are a prisoner in my dock. So you stand here and you keep your mouth shut.
Yes, sir.
Now, what did you mean when you said that we couldn't punish you?
When, sir?
I'm asking the questions, you're answering them.
Yes, sir.
You think we brought you here so that you could ask me questions and I would answer them?
No, sir.
Then what the hell did you mean when you said that we could not punish you?
I'm sorry, sir. I never said that you couldn't punish me.
Now you're telling us when you did say it. I'm asking you to tell us when you didn't say it. When didn't you say we couldn't punish you?
I always didn't say you couldn't
That's a
punish me.
barefaced lie! You whispered that we couldn't punish you to that dumb son of a bitch standing right there!
Oh, no, sir. I whispered to him that you couldn't find me guilty.
Well, I must be stupid because the distinction escapes me!
Well,
you're a
sir,
windy son of a bitch, aren't you?
No, sir.
No, sir. You're calling me a liar
No,
now?
sir.
No what, sir?
No, what?
No
What, sir?
Read me back the last line.
Read me back the last line.
Not my last line, somebody else's.
Read me back the last line.
That's my last line again.
Oh, no, sir, that's my last line. I read it to you just a moment ago.
All right.
Okay, it does retain a lot of the dark humor, I have to admit. Not as much, but...
Yeah.
So we haven't heard from Irene.
Yeah.
We should say that, and there's a term on the nose called the Papulian through line. One Papulian through line is that Charles Abbott, who actually has taken over the role of Yossarian, was in the HBO comedy Girls and dropped out after a season or two because he thought he was going to move on to better things. And a lot of people thought that maybe he had underrated Girls, as did that list, which put Girls at 26. Anyway, let's talk about your reactions to Catch-22.
He did a great job in this. Really good job. But something that Bill said helped me understand my own reaction to this, which is the idea that it wasn't as funny as it was in the book. And I'm going to make another connection to HBO because I'm thinking that when it came out, it was kind of like when abstract expressionism came out, it was just like breaking all the rules and it was so amazing and everybody couldn't believe it. But now, 50 years later, more than 50 years, 60, 70 years later, it's just not as interesting for people to just put splotches of things on the canvas, And so it's the same with the kind of critique, because I was thinking in the age of Veep, it's like we understand why everything is absurd, like so much of our art forms are about why the absurdity of life, the absurdity of rules, the absurdity of war, the absurdity of all this stuff. And that was really sharp and funny. And he made it really, really sharp and funny in the book. But now it sort of feels like, yeah, we know, we know that it's absurd, so that the absurdity just doesn't dig into us in the way that maybe that it used to.
I think that's a really great point.
That is a really, really great point. And I think you're absolutely right that it has something to do with the ensuing years. I also think it might have something to do with the different media that are used as well. The language in the book just is so much more in your face because you don't have all the other the sound and the visuals that of course are there that's true, but I think maybe even the book now would, if this book had come out now, it would have a different kind of, everybody's seen Veep, like we've seen all these kinds of, at the same time, I was
first of all, thinking George Clooney must have had so much fun with that scene that we just heard, because it was fun for him to do, and like the pacing of it and everything. But the whole scene of it, the way they reproduce the era is beautiful. I think the whole visual of the show is really like the bathing suits that the guys wear. Those 50s. Like I have a photograph of my father in a bathing suit just like that, lounging on the beach. Like the really short bathing suits, and like these tableau of these young men in the war, just kind of like hanging out. There's a lot of beautiful. I found there's a lot of beautiful things about it, but I feel like the sort of message or impact, of it was sort of didn't really do much for me.
One thing that I would say about it is that. First of all, I think Charles Abbott it proves that he can carry something like this, and he's very, very different from Alan Arkin, and there's almost he's very handsome, and with his officer's cap cocked a certain way, he kind of almost looks a little bit like Brando, and he has a kind of cloudy emotional state that he's in a lot of the time. And Mike Nichols tends to make emotional things cerebral. I thought Christopher Abbott managed to make this thing, Chris, kind of more emotional. I mean, you're dwelling with him and his emotions. He's bumping up against this bureaucratic absurdity, but when he's not doing that, I think you see an emotionally kind of real presence there.
Yeah, and the camera's just on his face. Yeah. The other thing, and I was like, who is that guy? The guy in the brothel, and it was Giancarlo Giannini. Yes. I was like, wow, So it's really interesting that he popped up in there, and he did a great job.
All right, so let's get one more comment because I was throwing that at you. I mean, talk a little bit, Chris, not Chris Abbott, about how it worked emotionally for you.
Yeah, well, that's I think where the strongest connection came for me. I appreciated the humor, but there was for me a real connection. This Yo-Yo, the main character, trying to get out of war, and it's like everything he does, it's more missions, and then. When people end up dying, that's not a spoiler, but the way the show takes such a churn, it's seamless to me. I experienced it as such, at least, and I really felt deeply, the character's pain, and especially in the last episode. Again, I won't go into too much detail, but he's covered in blood and naked, and just this face, and it was so well portrayed. And I really, similar to Bukowski, like I felt the raw, visceral, it was like I could feel what he was experiencing. And at the same time, it was like he almost seemed dead inside, but in a hauntingly beautiful portrayal. So that, I really did. That was, for me, the most important connection was that I felt something. Because if I'm watching something I don't feel something, then what's the point?
All right, we're going to wrap up here. We'll also have time for endorsements, so let's do that. We'll come back. We've been talking about Catch-22 on Hulu. You probably get one of those free trial things. Watch it and squeeze in the second season of Handmaid's Tale, too.
Massachusetts, only place for me, Massachusetts. Got a special date with that New England state.
Catch-22 is also what Bill de Blasio has to do if he wants to be the Democratic nominee. That feels like a dad joke. Did I just make a dad joke? I'll worry about that all day. Today's show was produced by Dad McPants and me, Kyone Wolf. The part of Bill Curry was played by Martin Balsam. We'll be back on Monday, scrambling after the weekend's news. And now, back to Colin.
And now it's time to make recommendations, endorsements, things like that. So we'll start with Bill Usman. What have you got for us?
Okay, I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to endorse something that I haven't seen yet because it just premieres tonight on Netflix. But with the people involved and the story it's telling,
know where you're going.
I think it's. I'm pretty confident about this. If it falls flat, you can bring me back on and humiliate me. Ava DuVernay, who has been very successful, except for A Wrinkle in Time, but in terms of the other work that she's doing, has taken on the story of the Central Park Five, which is a very, very important part of recent American history. And so it's a dramatic telling of the story of these young men called When They See Us. It debuts on Netflix tonight, and I'm pretty confident that it's going to be worth seeing and very powerful. things that I've already seen, there's a Ken, and he worked with his daughter, Sarah Burns, documentary about the Central Park Five, which then also was turned into a book. So that's the nonfiction part of the story. And then I think it'll be very interesting to see what Ava DuVernay does with turning it into a dramatic story.
All right. Irene Papoulis, we'll have you go next.
Okay. Is Chernobyl on HBO?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah. So I heard Virginia Heffernan endorse it, and I would have thought I never would have wanted to see something about Chernobyl, but I started watching it, and I thought it was fantastic. Even if you're not really in the mood to, because you know how horrible it was and everything, it was. I thought it was really good. I love the Flamingo Kid at Hartford Stage. Also, I endorse that heartily. It's a great. It's a fun escape musical. But I really want to endorse Mahler's Fifth Symphony and Beethoven's Triple Concerto, because I've been listening to them all week in preparation to going to the Hartford Symphony. And I just want to endorse listening to the music, to classical music, before you go to a concert and listen to it, and especially if it's Carolyn Kwan conducting, because it's just going to be so great.
Yes, Carolyn Kwan will be conducting that symphony this weekend. Chris Grosso, what have you got for us?
Yeah, well, with this being my first Nose appearance, I wanted to sound intelligent, so I was going to say like Chernobyl, which absolutely, it's terrifying but brilliant. Or then I was thinking American Gods or Twin Peaks, and I'm going to keep it real. Cobra Kai. I don't know if anybody's heard of it. I am dead serious. I love the Karate Kid. Cobra Kai picks up, X amount of years later. Daniel is a grown-up and Johnny's grown up, and it's on YouTube. I seriously went into it thinking this is going to be corny, but I've got to see what it's all about. I love the Karate Kid. 2 seasons, and I absolutely loved both of them. The writing is sincerely good. You get to follow, if you're a fan of the Karate Kid, the trajectory of their lives change. Johnny's this tragic alcoholic figure trying to get his life back together. Sincerely, it's a legit good show. It has its faults, but
there was a nose on it.
Yeah,
wasn't
we
it?
did a nose on the first season. Yeah.
Damn it, I missed it.
But it was during the first season, so I haven't seen the second season yet. And now you're making me want to see it.
Only got better.
You're gonna make me. I really loved it. I love the guy who plays the blonde guy. He's just terrific.
Oh, amazing! Yeah. Absolutely. Well, yeah. Season 2 is great.
All right, so I just got back from New York, and so I'm going to, in particular, endorse Gary, a sequel to Titus Andronicus, which is by Taylor Mack. It stars Nathan Lane, Christine Nielsen, and Julie White. It is a tremendous, interesting, troubling, hilarious show, but I've also been looking at the box office grosses. I'd say it's also in a little bit of trouble. Like if it doesn't win a bunch of Tonys at the Tony Awards, which are on June 9th, just about 10 days from now, it is going to probably have to close. But it really is a great show. We saw 3 shows in New York. We saw The Prom, which is also up for a bunch of Tonys. Then we went downtown and saw something called Original Sound, which is all about something that we've covered a lot on this show. It's sort of about who owns the rights to certain bits of music and how do people collaborate, particularly if they're borrowing other people's music, stuff like that. So, and all 3 of those shows are terrific. But Gary Needs You, and it really is a show like no other show. I don't have any time to describe it, I guess. And the other thing I would quickly say, because I've got a few seconds here, is don't be afraid to try the TKTS booth. I know it looks kind of intimidating. First of all, you should know there's 2 other there's not just the one at Times Square. There's one down at the Seaport, and there's one up by Lincoln Center. And they all have basically the same tickets. So if you're scared of the line at Times Square, you should also know that there's a Plays Express for just people who are not interested in seeing musicals. It's a really short line that goes up to 1 window. And so get in that line if you're not interested in seeing a musical. When you go to TKTS, always have 2 plays in mind, because if you get up there and there are no seats or no good seats to All My Sons and you don't have any idea of anything else you want to see, you have, in fact, wasted a lot of time standing out there in the sun. So, but it's a great, Broadway's really expensive. It's so expensive. And TKTS and some of the other discount methods can cut that way down for you. So I want you to feel as though you can. All right. So thanks very much to our terrific panel, Bill Usman, Irene Papoulis, and making his stellar debut, Chris Grosso, and we're going to go out with a song by Leon Redbone, who died earlier this week.
I said the night was mighty dark, so you could hardly see, 'cause the moon refused to shine. And there's a couple sitting